Welcome back to your July 2021 edition of the review of the return of travel. Now, this has been a very exciting month to be a Canadian traveler looking ahead at the return of domestic and international trips, and we've got lots to talk about. So if you're feeling antsy for those faraway trips, if you're double vaxxed and ready to go, then make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe to the Prince of Travel YouTube channel. As always, we're very grateful for your support, and especially as more and more people come back to traveling over the coming weeks and months, we're gonna have lots of things to discuss here, so make sure to subscribe and don't miss out. In today's monthly roundup of the return of travel, we'll start by looking at the situation for domestic travel, what the provinces and territories are doing. We'll also touch upon the situation with the sky-high prices of hotels and car rentals, and some strategies that you can use to mitigate these high prices. Then we'll take a look at international travel, with Canada's border restrictions continuing to loosen up. We'll also touch upon a situation that affects Canadian travelers in particular with respect to mixed and matched vaccines. And finally, we'll talk about a few countries around the world opening up again, but also a few cautionary tales as it relates to the coronavirus situation that continues to evolve. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's begin with domestic travel, and the key thing to remind you guys of here is that the so-called Atlantic bubble has been well and truly popped. All the Atlantic Canadian provinces are now open to fully vaccinated travelers without quarantine, with New Brunswick also open to partially vaccinated travelers, and Newfoundland and Labrador also open to partially vaccinated travelers with a negative test within 72 hours. If, like many Canadians over the past year, you've just been scratching your travel itch by flying back and forth between Ontario and Quebec and British Columbia and Alberta, perhaps with a pit stop in the prairies in the middle, then the good news is now you can venture east over to Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island, and New Brunswick, and explore more of Atlantic Canada after a long wait. Summertime and the early fall are widely considered the best times to visit, and so if you'd rather plan a domestic trip instead of venturing internationally this year, then the Atlantic Canadian provinces are going to be near the top of my recommendation list. In my opinion, it's also going to be a great time to check out the Canadian territories, which are just starting to open up to the rest of Canada. You can visit Yukon as long as you're fully vaccinated, and indeed, I myself do hope to check out Yukon sometime later this summer or fall. You can also go to the Northwest Territories if you're traveling with an approved tourism provider. And for Nunavut, you do have to email in advance and submit your vaccinated traveler declaration form in order to get an exemption from the quarantine. As long as you do email in advance and get that approval from Nunavut's Chief Public Health Officer, you can visit Nunavut for the purposes of tourism as well. It is so encouraging to me to see all of Canada finally starting to open up to vaccinated travelers once again. And even though we're all hyped up for the return of international travel, I do think it's also a great time to be exploring more within our own borders. As you embark on these trips, however, you might find that even though the airlines are offering competitive fare sales and you can redeem points for high-value business class flights, the hotels and car rentals seem to be exorbitantly overpriced. Indeed, I've recently been planning a few weekend trips around the region, and I've been finding that a weekend in, let's say, Kelowna, British Columbia, is costing about $500 to $600 per night at the Delta Hotel. Otherwise, if I don't want to stay at the Delta, I can also pay $300 per night for a Fairfield Inn and Suites. And if you look at car rental prices, it's similarly overpriced compared to historical levels. So what's going on there? Well, essentially what we're seeing is that with the progress on the vaccination front that Canada has been making, the rebound in demand for travel has outstripped the supply. People have a fair bit of disposable income to spend on travel after basically not traveling over the past year, and the travel providers themselves are struggling to keep up a little bit. And I would expect to see this phenomenon continue into the summer and into the fall. And so if you're traveling this season, just expect that you'll have to pay slightly higher prices than usual compared to before. It also means that it's a good time to redeem points if you have excess points to burn, because you're going to be getting good value for those points compared to the cash prices. Although sometimes the points prices themselves are going to be exorbitant as well. Going back to the Delta Okanagan Valley in Kelowna, that's costing either $600 per night for a weekend or 60,000 Bonvoy points. It's decent value for the Bonvoy points, but I'm still feeling hard-pressed to burn 120,000 Bonvoy points on a weekend trip in Kelowna. then again, it's probably going to be a better option than paying $300 per night at the Fairfield Inn. Turning our attention to international travel then, let's begin with Canada's further loosening of border restrictions that was just announced this week. After finally relaxing the 14-day quarantine earlier this month for returning fully vaccinated Canadian residents, Canada will now be allowing foreign visitors into the country who are also fully vaccinated. This step will begin with US residents and citizens who currently live in the US traveling into Canada, whether by air or by land, who are fully vaccinated as of August 9th, 2021, followed by foreign travelers of all nationalities who meet the entry requirements and are fully vaccinated as of September 7th. Now, this September 7th date for non-US foreign travelers being able to enter is tentative based on our domestic COVID-19 situation continuing to remain favorable as it is now. And let's hope that that does turn out to be the case, especially given our strong vaccination rates here in Canada. It's fantastic to see Canada finally following a science-based approach in opening up to the world, and it's going to provide a much needed boost to our own domestic travel industry as we continue to recover. Also happening on August 9th, 2021, remember the 3-day hotel quarantine policy that was introduced at the start of this year? That was pretty much a total disaster from start to finish. Yeah, it's getting abolished. And I think I speak for all of us when I say good riddance. I don't know what anybody was thinking implementing a $2,000 3-day hotel quarantine policy for a virus that has a 14-day incubation period while still not requiring travelers to actually follow any strict health protocols on their way to the hotel and during their hotel stay. And so I'm very happy to see the backs of that hotel quarantine policy. It's going to be abolished. Even if you are an unvaccinated traveler coming back to Canada, you just need to quarantine for 14 days at home now. You don't need to do the 3-day hotel quarantine. The fact that you could easily skip the hotel quarantine by flying into the US and crossing via the land border is also a bit of a joke, speaking as somebody who did that exact thing myself on the way back from Asia last month. And so now, even if you are unvaccinated, you can just fly straight into Canada and then go quarantine at home. There's no reason to have to go through the US and skip that hotel quarantine because it's finally being abolished. As a reminder, by the way, for all the things we're talking about in this video, whether it's domestic or international travel, you're considered fully vaccinated if you've had the full series of a Health Canada approved vaccine, Pfizer-BioNTech, Moderna, AstraZeneca, or Johnson & Johnson, at least 14 days before entering the relevant country, province, or territory. But speaking of those 4 Health Canada approved vaccines, even though most international travel news is encouraging these days, there's still reasons to be cautious. And one of those reasons that has come to light in recent weeks is the fact that mixing and matching vaccines is a practice that's largely approved here in Canada, but not necessarily around all countries in the world. Many Canadians will have gotten a mix of 2 different vaccines as part of their full series. Whether you're like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who got the AstraZeneca followed by one of the mRNA vaccines, or you're like myself, who got a mix of 2 different mRNA vaccines. That's a practice that's approved here in Canada, and that Canada in fact recommends for more of us to be able to get our second doses earlier, but it's a practice that's not necessarily recognized globally. For example, recently an Ontario-based couple had to cancel their Barbados trip because Barbados doesn't recognize mixing vaccines as being fully vaccinated, even though Canada does. And so they would have had to quarantine if they went to Barbados. Now, after hearing this story, Barbados actually changed their policy and started allowing and recognizing the mixing of vaccines. And similarly, there's some European countries where the AstraZeneca vaccine isn't necessarily recognized. And so even though those European countries might be open to Canadian travelers who are fully vaccinated on paper, if you had one of the AstraZeneca vaccines as one of your doses, it might give you difficulties in entering the country. For its part, Canada's government has come out and said that this is likely to only be a short-term issue for Canadian travelers, and that whatever vaccine mixes are valid in Canada, they're trying to work with the international community to make sure that they're recognized globally as well. And personally, I would expect issues like these facing Canadian travelers to be less and less common as we go into the fall and into the winter, as more and more Canadians start to travel around the world. But if you're planning any trips in the near term as somebody who did get a mix of the vaccines, then make sure to check your destination country's rules as it relates to the vaccine mixes. And if it's not clear, then it might be worth giving the embassy a call just to double check that you would be eligible to enter. And on that note, let's wrap up the video by checking in on a few countries around the world as they look to reopen to Canadian travelers. Both Belgium and the Netherlands are now open to all Canadian travelers without any sort of proof of vaccination or testing required, which is great news if you're looking to travel to that part of Western Europe. And whisper it quietly, but Japan is now exploring the feasibility of exempting foreign travelers who are vaccinated from the country's strict entry requirements. Imagine that. Imagine soon we might be able to visit Japan. The yakitori in Tokyo, the ramen in Hokkaido, the okonomiyaki in Osaka, I can just taste it on my tongue already. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce you to our improved Travel During COVID-19 resource over on princeoftravel.com, where you can now select your destination country and see at a glance the local COVID-19 situation, as well as a comparison to Canada on a handy chart. You can also select your destination Canadian province and compare the COVID-19 situation there to your home province within Canada as well. It did take us a fair bit of time to build out this feature, and so I do hope you guys find it useful as you look up the domestic and international COVID-19 situation in the places you want to go over the coming weeks, months, and years. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you're as hyped up as I am for the return of travel this month, next month, and into the future. If so, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to the Prince of Travel YouTube channel. Just click the subscribe button below the video so that you don't miss out on any key information as you embark on your own revenge travel trips. Let me know in the comments below. Are you double vaxxed yet? Are you team pure vaccine or are you team mix and match? And where are you going this summer and fall? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next video. To evolve! So, boom, boom, boom. I'm starving.